Hi, you're listening to the Content Sells podcast, the show all about how to create content to attract, convert, and keep your ideal clients. I'm your host, Suzi Dafnis. This is my co-host, Michelle Falzon. Hey, Michelle.
Hey, Suzi, how are you doing today?
I am really good. I have been batch creating podcasts in advance of heading off on a big trip. And so I've been talking a lot.
I find myself doing that the same. I've had a whole heap of client strategy sessions and things. I feel like I just want to go somewhere and sit quietly. However, I always love being on a podcast with you, and I love it because today we've got a guest who is talking to us about talking. She's someone who's got so much experience with having been a radio presenter and a producer and having her own podcast. And we're going to be kind of getting a bit meta today. We're having a podcast about how to have a better podcast.
I love that. So we are talking specifically to those of you who either want to have a podcast in the future or you have a podcast and it's not quite performing at the level that you might want it to. And our guest, as Michelle hinted to, has got a lot of experience in this area. She has produced award-winning shows like Bang On, Inside the Big Day Out, Take 5, and she's helped grow shows from hundreds to millions of downloads. Wouldn't that be fun? Awesome. And so she helps female entrepreneurs elevate their podcasts from unknown, she says, to unforgettable through one-on-one group coaching programs and helping through the whole production process. And she has seen 10 times the download growth for the women that she works with. So that's very exciting. Maybe we'll get some great tips for this show. And she believes that every woman's voice matters. I love that. So her name is Gab Burke. And as Michelle said, she's been in the media for a long time, for 15 years. And she says this on her website. She said, every woman with a podcast dreams of a bigger audience, loyal followers, and turning expertise into income, but many face stagnant downloads and self-doubt. And she knows that struggle personally, so she's going to help us get on the other side of that in this interview. So let's go ahead and get her on the line. Hey, Gab, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Well, thank you for being here. We're very excited about this conversation. We've been doing this podcast for about a million years, and more women are wanting to not only start a podcast but grow one. So we're excited for this conversation.
Me too.
Let's start with the big picture. Why is having a high-quality podcast, not just any old podcast, such a powerful move for business owners right now?
The thing with podcasting is that it's such a powerful medium for connecting. You have direct access to your ideal customers, to your ideal clients, to your audience. And that is something that not many other forms of media give. Yes, there's social media, but there's still an element of separation between you and your audience. The thing with podcasts is whether it's visual or whether it's audio, it's a really intimate type of media. And so you could be, your voice is inside your customers' heads. It's, your face is in their face and they feel like they get to know you much more than they would if they were just to read something on your blog or read something on your website or, read any kind of other marketing material. So it is really, really powerful in that sense. It's so, it's hard to describe why podcasting is so powerful, but I think the first thing that comes to mind is that it's about connection and it's about community, and the most popular podcasts and the most successful podcasts really work hard to create a space for people to come together, to find each other, to have these sort of little micro tribes. And it's separate from your friendship groups. It's separate from your networks. It's like this particular person does this thing that I love so much, and I'm going to email them. I'm going to slide into their DMs. I'm going to absorb every single bit of content they create, and my access point is a podcast. So for many reasons, it's a very powerful thing. The point is, though, it needs to be a high quality offering. As you said, not just any podcast. You can't just whack anything up and expect people to kind of follow. It's not just a case of if you build it, they will come. It's a craft, and there are very kind of clever tools that you can lean on to make sure that you're making the most of this medium. I would always say, don't just do a podcast for the sake of it because everyone says do a podcast. Having said that, I want to encourage more women to do podcasts. But I think if you have the right strategy, the right plan, the right approach to it, it can be possibly one of the biggest kind of marketing strategies for your entire business in this day and age.
And Michelle and I, we've had people come on, they go, my kids know your voice, my husband knows your voice, I'm always playing you in the background. And it's such a powerful connection tool. That's what I found. And I love the intimacy of it. Like you said, we're right inside people's heads. Where do you get that sort of access? You know, that's so powerful. Now, you have a wonderful resource, which is about how to grow your podcast. We're going to make that available to our listeners. So thank you firstly for that. And one of the points that you make in it that I want to talk about is you talk about the importance of shortening your podcast intro. So do tell us exactly which bit you are calling the intro. Again, for some people who are not as familiar or don't have a podcast, what makes a strong, punchy intro that really hooks our listeners in, has them, turn up the volume, lean in, and get us closer to building trust with that listener?
I think your intro is everything other than artwork, titles, copy, that's kind of the first touch point that people will have for your podcast. But then if you actually get them past that point and they hit play, with YouTube, you've got about 3 seconds to hook a viewer. With audio podcasts, you have a little bit more time, but it's still really only 10 to 15 seconds. If somebody doesn't like something about the intro, if it's too long, if it's too waffly, if the audio is not great, whatever it might be, if it's boring or there's any lag in any way, they will just switch off, because with podcasts, you're not just competing with other podcasts, you're competing with any other form of digital consumption. That is Netflix and Disney, that is YouTube, that is, online articles, things that people read online, anything, social media. So you're competing with all of content for all time. So, and our attention spans are getting shorter. So that's why I say it's really important to absolutely nail that intro. And the best way that I would say to do that is, and something I'm hearing a lot and seeing a lot in podcasts, is the double intro. So a lot of my clients that I talk to, one of the first things they say to me when they're thinking about starting a podcast is, how do I go about getting a snappy kind of intro produced with music and my voice? And I explain the podcast. And I say now, don't bother. Honestly, don't bother. Yes, because I listen to podcasts and I watch podcasts now, and sometimes it can be a minute to 2 minutes to even 3 minutes. I heard one the other day before we even got to the gold of the episode, and that's too long. Like, especially if this is somebody's first touch point, their first introduction to you. If you make them wait and work that hard just to get to the gold, they're going to leave and they're going to find something else. So that's why I say, don't even worry about an intro, as in getting a produced, polished intro, because the other thing that I often find with those polished intros, because independent podcasters are, they might outsource that, somebody makes it for them, and then they drop it into their session, their editing session at the start of every episode, and then they whack in the recording of the particular episode. And I always hear it happens all the time. This beautiful polished intro says, hi, I'm Gab. I'm, from Podcast with Gab. And this is the podcast where we do X, Y, Z. And I'd really love you to join me every week while we do X, Y, Z. And then the music fades out and it's lovely. And then the episode starts and the host goes, hi, I'm Gab.
Hi, I'm Gab.
And welcome to, and it's, but you just said that. And also what happens often is, unless you can replicate the quality of that produced intro, then when it's a switch to now it's the episode proper, and there's a very clear difference between the quality, it might, you might switch to Zoom or Clean Feed or whatever you're using. That's also a bit of a turn off. You go like, oh, well, hang on, I just got this beautiful thing and that was quite appealing, and now somebody's saying hello to me again, and it sounds very different, or it looks very different. It's a confusing experience. And like with any kind of marketing, you want to try and take out any of that resistance, any of that reason for someone to go, no, I'm scrolling on to the next thing. I've got this.
Okay, I have questions. So there's a couple of formats that we're familiar with. There's the cold open, like there's a little snippet, music, and then the intro. There's that version. Or there's the music piece, which you're calling the pre-recorded piece, and then go into it. You're saying just go, no music, nothing, just go into it. Go, hi, I'm Suzi, this is Michelle, this is the Content Sales Podcast. Today we're talking about, is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, I mean, if you've already had music produced or you've licensed some music, and I think Content Sales does this really well. It's now basically part of the brand, the sound, the music that you have at the start. I would keep that for you, absolutely. If you were starting today, would I tell you to bother about it? No, because I'd say, I want to hear Suzi and Michelle. I want to hear your voices. I want to see you. So I would say don't bother, especially if that's going to be something that stops you from starting. I would rather you start than worry about having fancy production. I think it's a carryover from traditional broadcast media, radio shows, have intros and certainly, TV shows, they all have intros and whatever. It's been and done. And our attention spans are a lot shorter now. It's now no longer the case where, quick, the credits of Friends is starting. I've quickly got to dash to the loo, get the popcorn, sort out the other things, and then I'll sit down for the start of the episode. It doesn't happen like that anymore, especially if you put yourself in your listener or your viewer's environment where they're consuming your content. If they're sitting on a train, if they're driving, if they're somewhere where they can just, usually they've got a phone and they're looking at it and they're just scrolling onto the next thing. It's too easy for them to go, they lost me, goodbye. So there's two things there. If you've already made an intro, I would consider really shortening it or just using a piece of it, and that might just be a couple of seconds of music and then straight into your voice. Yeah. If you haven't bothered with that, just give me your voice. And you don't need to explain for a minute who you are and what you do. I also hear just really long intros where the copy is just too long and the host is reading it and it's not connecting me. I would even say, hi, I'm Gab. This is my podcast with Gab, and just start telling a story.
Yeah, gotcha. Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you're saying we're competing with Netflix, we're competing with all of these. I know the first thing I do when I start a show with Netflix, it says skip the intro. I'm clicking that button, right? I'm sitting there, I'm ready to go. I don't need to have that credit, as you said, to run to the, kitchen and make a cup of tea. So, and that's something I think we've always been mindful about on this show. Like also even the banter at the beginning, we tend to just try and get right into it. And I know people have commented on that they like that we're not faffing about for too long at the start about our weekend. And we say, sometimes nothing, really quick, and other times just a short thing that just helps people to know us and, for it just to ground the connection. So I love what you're saying there. And another thing that attracts people to our show, like one of those you're talking about these early connection points. And this is something we also think a lot about, is the episode title. So people are, wandering around. They may be seeing you've posted about the episode on social media, or they're not following you yet and they're just scrolling around in Apple Podcast or a friend's talking about it or whatever. That title is so, so important. We want to pick your brain a bit on your best practices around titles. Like, what's the balance between that title being clickable and authentic? Do we have to trade anything on the authentic side? Do we get too clever and quirky? Should we be much more keyword oriented? How do we use our titles to get seen by more people, to be more discoverable, and also not trade in our authenticity and to not sound too clickbaity?
Absolutely. Again, as you say, it's the front door, isn't it? And it's one of those things you really need to work at to get right, because if you get it wrong, someone just scrolls on and they pick something else. So, and look, I've been doing this for a long time. I have spent many years experimenting all the time. Even today, I sort of tossed and turned with a particular episode title, and then I just went with the most simple thing that I thought someone would Google. So I think, and I go into this in my How to Grow Your Podcast guide. There's particular character lengths, and there's online character counters for this. Apple, it's best if you will be allowed more characters, but it cuts off after about 40 characters on Apple Podcasts. If you're on Spotify, it's about 30. It's even less. So what I would say is succinct, and it has to do what it says on the tin. So, for example, what I mean with when I say we've got to balance authenticity with clickable, we don't want clickbait. We all know those articles that are clickbait. It's, this Hollywood actor seen with another woman, and then you click the article and it's that person's sister or aunt or something like that. And you're like, that's just a waste of everyone's time. So you definitely want to avoid anything like that, especially with podcasting. As I said before, it's such a powerful medium for connection. People sniff out that kind of gotcha stuff straight away, and it just doesn't work on this platform. So you really want to think about, what is this podcast about, and what does my audience get out of it and tell them what that is. If there's several topics, lead with the most clickable one, the most popular one, and you can do that easily by going to Google Keyword Planner. And actually, you could, a step before that, chuck your episode brief and anything else. If you've got a transcript, great, chuck it into ChatGPT or whatever you use and get some suggested keywords or key phrases, and then pop that into Google Keyword Planner and just see what kind of traffic there is around certain terms, and then use that as a guide for your title. The other big thing, and this is a hard one, if you have a podcast where you have guests, I would highly recommend not using the guest's name in the title.
Because we're offenders. We do that all the time. Tell us.
Unless it's Lady Gaga, obviously you would put that name in the title because that's a huge name and a huge brand, and people are searching for her content.
Oh, that's good, because she's our next guest.
Great. Oh, good. Is she following me? Awesome. That makes me feel great. But the reason why I say this is, if you were to put Gab Burke, podcasting with Gab Burke, or podcast tips with Gab Burke, or Gab Burke tells you podcasting tips in the title of this episode, for example, people, you two know me, but outside of my network and a handful or a very small kind of circle of people who know my particular work and my portfolio, I'm not known. So if I'm coming to your podcast for the first time and I'm looking for podcast tips, I don't know Gab from a bar of soap, right?
This is a great point.
So what you want to think about, and I would also preface this, do this if you're pitching for PR. If you're pitching for media opportunities, put this in the subject of your emails. Podcast expert talks about superannuation, what you need to do with your superannuation before you whatever. Or finance expert talks about, podcast expert talks about how to grow, right? That's your email subject line. Do the same thing with your podcast titles, because that's what people are going to be searching for. They will get to know your guest through the episode, and through the episode, they will understand this person's credentials and how great they are and all the other things that you will cover in the episode. But right from the start at the front door, if I opened the door and said, "Hi," they'd go, I don't know you. Like, why would I come into your house? I don't know you. But if you said, the sign out the front saying there's a podcast expert inside and I happen to be needing to improve my podcast, I'd be like, oh, I'm going to knock on that door, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I love it. So we would change this episode from How to Grow Your Podcast with Gab Burke to Podcast Expert Shares How to Grow Your Podcast, or something like that.
Yep. Or
great.
top tips or quick things you can do, whatever the guest says or is doing for your audience. But absolutely, that would be the key. Don't put the person's name unless they are famous.
That you have,
A known name. That's really great. And what I like too is that we're still signaling that it's an interview, because we do a mix. Sometimes it's just Suzi and I, and we're sharing, content, and other times we've got a guest, and we'll very often feature the photo of the guest in the materials. So it's good to signal that there's a guest. But I love this more strategic, leveraged kind of discoverability, keyword kind of use of, podcast expert versus Gab Burke.
Totally. And I'm not going to be offended by that. And I think most of your guests, the thing is, you'll have the opportunity to talk about the guest's name in the episode copy, in the blog post, in the social media, in the imaging, everything else. They'll be there, but they just don't need to be in the title of your episode.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a write-a-downer. We're doing that one. And so another thing I want to talk about is podcast data. So just shifting gears a little bit from sort of the front door, maybe a little bit more now to the back door, which is like, what's happened with my podcast and how do I analyze the history and what's going on? There's a whole range of metrics that have different tools give us, and it can be a bit bamboozling. You've got some thoughts about the metrics to track, like what would be a few simple things, especially if I'm getting started and I want to grow, because sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees with metrics. I find too many metrics. I don't know what to do. I'm overwhelmed. But if I know there's 2 or 3 things I'm tracking, I can see, I did better this one. When I changed that, this happened. So what would be your tips on analyzing our data, and what are the metrics to track?
So the biggest thing for me is downloads are a bit more of a vanity metric. However, we can't help ourselves. It's like the amount of likes we get on our social media posts. We see a certain number of downloads and we get a boost, or we feel a bit deflated. What I want you to think about is, if you're looking at your downloads every week, and those numbers aren't massive, or they're less than you expected, don't panic. It's all right. It's not the best way to measure the success of your podcast. So one of the things that you can look for in your podcast dashboard, and if you don't have access to this type of data, I would suggest maybe looking at other podcast platforms to host your podcast on. One of the best things that you can look at is completion rate. So this is the rate, this is how long someone is listening to or watching your show. And if you have a high completion rate, it means things are great. It means that you might have small download numbers, but those people are staying for pretty much the entire episode. If you have low completion rate numbers, then it means that there's a drop-off point, and certain podcast platforms actually allow you to go in and see roughly if there's an average drop-off rate so that you can really go, okay, cool, everyone's dropping off after 7 minutes. What am I doing
after my long intro?
Yeah. What am I doing at the 7-minute mark? Is there something I'm doing every time? Do I have segments? Is there a particular segment that people aren't sticking around for? Am I getting to a certain point? Whatever. There's a really great example I can give you about a parenting podcast in the US. And they're, really popular parenting podcast, but they just were finding that they weren't growing. Now, this podcast, the way it was pitched, all of the marketing around it, all the details were basically about helping parents to parent, to make good choices, to, when this happens to you, this is what you can do. When your kids throw you this one, this is how you can handle it. And what they found was that they had this high download number, which made them look really successful. But when they looked at their completion rate, it was like 2 minutes, 2-3 minutes, and people were dropping off, and they were like, what's going on? And so they went back through all their episodes and they had a listen. And what they were finding is, for the episodes that were like how to deal with a toddler meltdown when you're in the shopping center, they would play that episode. It would have a high download number attached to it, but again, a very, very low completion rate. And they'd listen to that episode, and what they found was, intro, hello, this is what we're going to talk about today. And then the two hosts would have this really waffly long conversation about what they were doing, what happened in the last week, what happened since we spoke, all this kind of stuff. And they didn't actually get to how to deal with that toddler meltdown in a shopping center until much further into the episode. Right. And when they looked at who their ideal listener was and who they were trying to attract, it was predominantly mums, busy mums who had searched for something, pressed play and gone, I need this now. I'm in the middle of the meltdown, or the meltdown just happened.
I'm in the middle of the meltdown in the mall.
I need something right now. And so that person did not have time to stick around for the 15 or 20 minutes it took to actually get to the gold. So again, back to my earlier point about those punchy intros. Say what you're going to do and then deliver it straight away. And I guarantee you can still do the host chatting. You can still do the fun banter. You can still do all that stuff throughout the episode, at the end of the episode, anywhere else to show your own personality and to kind of bring the audience into, so you're not just a robot talking about, here's all my interesting things that I need to tell you this week that you'll find value in. You can still make it really human and connecting, but get to it. That's the what I want to say about the key data that you should be looking at is those completion rates. And if there's a particular point that you're finding that people are dropping off, it might be the intro, it might be certain episodes just aren't landing. It might be that when you do have a guest, they do really well. It might be when you have guests, they don't do well. And turns out people just want to hear you. So you can actually make better decisions around your content purely by looking at that particular data metric.
That is gold.
And the other thing is, if there are really popular episodes that you have, just repeat them. If you did them,
do more.
Yeah,
do more of those.
Definitely do more of those. But if you're also, independent and you're running your own business at the same time and all these things, you don't have time. You can actually, just a really quick hack. If you've run out of ideas or you just don't have the energy for something, or it's the end of the month and you're like, I'm going to put an episode in the feed, just go back to your best episode from last year or 2 years ago and republish. Just say, hey, this was so popular. I think people really loved it because of XYZ. Here it is. Press play, go. Yeah, don't be afraid because people can't remember what they watched or listened to last week. They're not going to be angry at you for playing something amazing from a couple of years ago.
Love that.
So good.
Oh, so good. Now, there are many women in our Her Business community. Many of our listeners are in the community, and they are natural connectors. And there's a tip in your free resource that we're going to give everyone access to, which is about co-creating with your audience, which I think is fascinating. Can you share an example or two examples of how you've seen podcasters do that well, co-create with their audience?
Absolutely. I mean, the beauty of this is if you do this really well, you can align with brands who will pay you good money to make your podcast because their brand is exactly aligned with this really loyal, engaged audience that you've created. So if you make that connection and it's deep, then there's this beautiful thing with podcasting now where you can actually make a return on your investment and your time and your energy into this show. You can actually align with brands who talk directly to your audience because it's way faster for them and it's way more powerful than listening to a bank ad at the start of a podcast, which means nothing. So yes, I can give you some examples. So 2 podcasts that I've worked on. One of them is Bang On with Miff Warhurst and Zan Rowe. This was, it's on a hiatus at the moment, but this was an amazing example of creating a community. So that podcast created an inbox specifically. So, it was, the Bang On inbox. And they often asked for you to, email them, let them know whatever they were talking about, anything. Just say hello, whatever you want to do. And that podcast, every week, thousands of emails. And over the course of the podcast history, it was so personal. It was so connecting, the stories that people shared. I remember, emailing back and forth with this listener, a loyal listener from London. And when she first started listening to the podcast, she was going through treatment for bowel cancer. And then a few years later, she popped up again in the inbox and she emailed and said, Gab, I just want you to talk to Miff and Zan and let them know that today I'm going in for my last treatment. I've done it, and basically Bang On has been there for me the entire time. And, so the way that people were connecting with that podcast because there was an access point for them too. It wasn't just about these 2 hosts and I can slide into their DMs on Instagram. It was about being invited constantly to be a part of that podcast. Another thing that was done was that every now and then.
So were they reading out the questions or reading out some of the emails or that's in the co-creation. Got it.
And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It creates content for your show. When people share their amazing hot takes or hilarious things or really devastating things, whatever it is, it's stuff that you can then share with permission, obviously, but it's content that you can then share on your show, and then that creates that beautiful, thing where other people go, oh, wow, they shared that. Okay, yeah, I can email the show now.
Yeah, right.
And then there's episodes where basically it would be like a full audience. They called it a bang back where, here's what we're banging on about this week, but we want you to tell us what you're banging on about. And so people would, and the whole episode was just audience voices. It wasn't even the hosts, right?
I love that.
Beautiful ecosystem. Another podcast I've worked on recently that did this beautifully was Ladies, We Need to Talk. Often, a lot of the most incredible talent who appear on that podcast are people who emailed the inbox and shared the most intimate details about their lives. And then with, permission and, a very caring and supportive environment, they would then be guests on that podcast and share their experiences, which inevitably help other women who are going through whatever issue the podcast episode is about. So it's just the more that you can lean on that community and they're co-creating it with you, the more successful your podcast will be.
I've seen, and like, what a gig would this be? Oprah does that on her podcast. And I don't know how they must be on an email list or something, but she'll quite often have people come on and ask their question in real time to the guest author or talk about their experience of something. And it's the most interesting listening because it's not just Oprah and some expert talking, it's a real life, human that I can relate to. Now, we've talked about co-creating with our audience, but partnerships are another opportunity, I think, for small business owners, even those with the tiniest of niches. And maybe they pay us for us, maybe they don't. But if we're looking to grow our podcast, how might we think about partnerships without diluting our own voice and our own brand?
Yes, absolutely. So the first thing I would say to that point is don't be tempted by somebody's big social media following to get this person on your podcast because they've got a huge profile. If they're not completely aligned with your audience and what your audience are coming to you for, it's unlikely that their followers are going to come to your podcast and stay just because you got them on and they shared it. So that's not really a strategy that I would recommend. It's much better getting the most fascinating people who talk specifically to your niche on your show than it is for someone, super high high profile
High
who's
profile.
not quite aligned. So then the other thing I would suggest is that you can share, if there's somebody else who hosts a podcast and it's similar to yours, or not even similar, just that you share similar audiences, you can share an episode in each other's feed. Just, record a quick intro and share it and drop it in. And this is what we talk about on our podcast and vice versa. That can be a really powerful way to not actually have to do that much, not have to try to align each other's schedules to get something done. You can literally just say, hey, what's your best episode? Here's ours. Can we swap in that way? So that's a fast way to do it as well. I would also suggest that, find high profile people in your specific industry or niche who might be the go-to person. It's the person that the radio or the TV always call up to talk about when something, major happens in this particular area. They might not have a podcast of their own, but they might be the person that's often the speaker at the events or whatever. A really good idea to kind of get those people on to your podcast, because they do have a following and they are going to share it, and it's, they are aligned with your audience, but they're not a huge, I guess what I'm trying to say is they're not an influencer brand in themselves, if that makes sense. So what I said before about don't go for the person with the huge social media following, I mean, don't go for the influencer. Don't think that you have to do that to grow an audience. Go for the person who's really known in their particular niche that matches with yours, and get them on, because they're going to be fascinating. They're going to tell fascinating stories, and then they're going to share it. And it's going to be good in that way.
Thanks.
I think, it depends again on the game you're playing, but for us, we take pride in unearthing all of these amazing experts that maybe others haven't heard about, calling on our personal networks and the people we know are the behind the scenes brilliance that you're not going to find elsewhere. And that can be a really great strategy. So I love what you said there. I want to change tack again and think about, I'm imagining people that are listening, whether they've got a podcast now, whether they're thinking about having a podcast, or whether they're never going to have a podcast, but they're going to learn a lot that they can apply in other parts of their business. But I want to get you to think now about the woman who has got a podcast, and maybe she's got herself in a bit of a rut. It's pretty easy to do. It's a hungry beast getting those episodes created at whatever interval your show comes out. And maybe they've been banging away at it for a while and they haven't seen the growth. So we've got this free resource. It's going to have sort of tips in that and 5 steps. But what would you say right now? I mean, everybody should go and download that resource. But what would you say right now to that woman?
I'd say focus on the audience and that community aspect. Focus on co-creating with them, because even, in the darkest of times, it's always other people that help you through it, isn't it? And so if you're struggling with ideas, if you're really just like, is anyone listening? Is anyone watching? Is this even worth doing? Go back through your inbox, go back through your DMs, go back through the comments on your, the reviews, and just hear what people are saying. It will spark ideas. Do a call out. Say, look, I'm keen to get some of you on the podcast. I want to answer your questions, or I want to interview you. Reach out to me. Get them involved as much as possible, especially if you share the mission. If you share that mission with them, they feel empowered. They feel like it's kind of their show too. It's not just yours. And I think that's the first and fastest, because in the guide, and as we've talked about, you can make snappy intros right now. You can change the way that you title your episodes right now. It's not going to make you feel amazing, right? And you're probably not going to see instant success. You're not going to see a huge leap in downloads overnight. It's still going to take some time. Also, side note, I would be very wary of any strategist who suggests that you can download your numbers if you buy my guide and do this, and in a week's time you'll have 10,000 or 20,000 or a million. Just ignore all those. It's not possible. Podcasting growth takes time, but you're not going to see an immediate kind of response from just changing your titles or making your intro snappy or working out what content might work a bit better. So I think if you can lean on that audience and really start to build the community and really tap into that, that is, again, as I said, the self-fulfilling prophecy. That will start to pay you dividends. That's where the power of podcasting lies. And if you're offering value and you're really focusing on your audience being the MVP, they are the main character energy. It's not actually the host. It's the person who's going to consume the content. If you make it all about them and giving them as much value as possible, they will give back tenfold, and it will just, and they will become your most powerful advocates, and it will just kind of snowball from there. So lean on that community aspect.
And this may be the same answer actually for the question I want to ask, which is because you've built shows from hundreds to, millions of downloads. And even though we're not just measuring that, is there a lesson from those experiences that you think is especially relevant to small business owners who are podcasting or about to start podcasting?
Yes, I would absolutely say, please remind yourself right now that you are running a business full-time, probably more than full-time hours, and that a podcast is often produced by either one full-time person or an entire team of people working full-time. So please remember that if you are feeling a bit deflated, if you are thinking, should I start this? Should I keep going? It's the work of multiple people that make the most successful podcasts. Don't for a minute look at Diary of a CEO and look at those download numbers or look at those hits and go, oh my God, why can't I be Stephen Bartlett? Why can't I get to those numbers? He's got hundreds of people. They're literally testing every single possible thing, from their thumbnails to their titles to their episode copy to everything. So they're even looking for specific talent based on whether they're trending in the world. So don't compare yourself to any other podcast. Just remember that it is a full-time job and you're already doing one of those. So success looks really different. So yeah, my first and foremost thing to say is the success metric that you are guided by needs to be realistic for you, and please don't look at somebody else's level of success and think that you should be doing that or you should be achieving that, and that your podcast is therefore not valuable. And the other thing I would say is I'm the biggest advocate for getting more women in podcasting. If you're listening to this and going, I've always thought about starting a podcast, but everyone seems to have a podcast, what could I possibly say that would add to the world of podcasts? Yes, there are a lot of podcasts. I had a quick look. I think at last count, there's something like 4.5 million of them. Only about 460,000 of them are regular. People are updating them regularly. So there's a lot of pod fade there. And pod fade is something like after about 10 episodes, people quit or people stop or people realize it's really hard to keep doing it because it's a full-time job often. So what I would say is, yes, you should start a podcast. You have something very valuable to say. Your voice should be heard. We need more women. We desperately need more women in podcasting. But please don't assume that you're going to get millions of downloads or even thousands or tens of thousands of downloads in the first 6 weeks, maybe not even the first 6 months, maybe not even the first year, maybe not ever. Some of the most successful podcasts I've seen with the most engaged followers have been sitting at a couple of thousand downloads per episode, but what they give is so high value to this particular group of people. And the way that this podcast that I'm thinking of in particular has made money from it is that they just aligned with a brand who needed to get in front of this specific audience so badly, and they knew that they could, and the conversion rate for them was amazing. It worked out perfectly. So there's different ways of looking at success, and it's about finding what's realistic for you and what's right for you. And please don't compare yourself to anyone else, because women do that all the time.
Yeah, and you make a good point. Their job is the podcast. That is their business. It's like people who monetize successful YouTube channels. It's different. You're a business owner. This is a vehicle for you to connect with your clients, for you to make your offers, for you to get more engagement, for people to get to know and like and trust you. And I love that you distinguish that for them. It's we have egos and we're like, I want more followers, I want more listens, etc. Now you're working with clients one-on-one, helping them with their podcast. You're doing group coaching. We're going to give everyone all those details. The final thing I want to ask you, is there anything you haven't told us that you want to add before we let you go?
Anything that I want to add? Oh, just that podcasting should be fun. If you are at a point where it's starting to not feel fun anymore, and I've had a lot of these conversations with female business owners who host podcasts in recent months, that, it's hard to come up with new ideas. It's, you get to the week of and you're thinking, I just got to record something, just whack any old thing up into the feed. If you are disappointed with your downloads, because it's a metric. Yes, I'm saying it's not the metric, but it's still a metric, and it still makes you feel a bit, not great when the numbers don't seem to be growing, or they're flatlined, or worse, they're dropping. Ask me for help. There's ways that we can change things to bring the fun back in. And actually, I'm about to work with someone on mapping out their entire 2026 strategy. Every single episode for the year will be mapped out. I mean, if that sounds like something that would be valuable to you and you could just, it's a set and forget, then please, book a meeting. I've got free one-on-ones just to have a chat and just kind of see where you're at. I'd rather you do that than either feel really bad about yourself or give up. Because as I said before, we need more women in podcasting. So please reach out before you get to the point where you think, I'll just stop doing it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been so valuable, for me as a podcast creator, and I'm sure for Michelle as well, but so useful for our audience. And we are big champions of supporting women any way we can. And podcasting is a way to have visibility and have a voice. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute joy. Oh my God, I feel like I've just, spent time with two famous people. Seriously.
Oh, thank you, Gab. You're awesome.
That was so good.
It was fantastic. I mean, it's great when you're in the presence of someone who just knows. They have deep, deep knowledge, and it's not just theoretical. It's based on years of experience and growing podcasts to millions of listeners and seeing all kinds of scenarios and noticing the patterns, which is, obviously what Gab was doing there. It was a masterclass.
Yeah, and I love hearing things that, oh my gosh, I'd forgotten about that, but also hearing new distinctions that I hadn't heard before, like the one about the titles and not putting in the names of people who are not Lady Gaga or, anyone super famous, because that's not going to attract more people. But the title itself might, the topic might, or, her suggested hack of the expert on whatever topic it is. I thought that was really, really, so there was a really great combination for me of strategic thinking around your podcast, but also some really great little tactical things that you can do, like, looking at your downloads, but looking at your completion rates, looking at, hey, you know what? People always get through our interviews, but not so much when, whatever the situation is. I thought that was really, really telling.
Yeah, and just sort of springboarding off that conversation she had about metrics, which, we're big on, and that was music to both our souls, I think, about, look at your numbers and learn from them. What I really loved, the underlying kind of message in there, was she was speaking about a theme that's so prevalent in this show. The real reason why we put this show together, which was this idea of no content without conversion, like really understanding why are you spinning your wheels creating a podcast? Why are you writing those emails? Why are you doing that webinar? Why are you? And really understanding the conversion job of each piece of content. And that's what she was really getting us to think about. With the metrics, it's not about number of downloads. It's about how many people are engaging with your content. And if I go a step further, it's like, what do you want to get out of it? I love the story she told about the person with the very small number of downloads each month.
Yes.
But they found what they wanted to get out of it was to absolutely be the go-to resource for this very specific niche, which they had a sponsor who would give them an income, and as long as they could kind of get access to that niche. That was the conversion job of that podcast, attract that niche. And so for anybody that's got a podcast right now, what is the conversion job of that podcast? Is it that you want to get 5 calls booked this month from the episodes you do this month, and every month 5 people booking in to speak to you? Is it that you want to get more speaking gigs? Because actually your whole business model is around getting paid to speak in keynotes and then driving those leads into your business. So how do you create a podcast that's going to get you more speaking gigs? Is it that you want to create content for your community? That's one of the things that, we get value out of with our podcasts. There's each one of them is more or less a lesson. And so when we're inside our communities, we can say, hey, there's a podcast on that, and they can go and listen to it and tap into all of our past expertise. Is it that you want to get a sponsor and a particular type of sponsor? So knowing the conversion job of your podcast is so key, and don't let those vanity metrics sway you from that. Think about what's the metric that's most important to show you're winning around the job of your podcast. And I love that she was singing that same song.
Absolutely. And I think that, as a business owner, you're wearing so many hats all the time. And so if you do not have a podcast, we're not saying you should have a podcast. If you do have a podcast and you're not going to be part of that podcast fade where after 10 episodes you're going to give up, it's going to come back to what Michelle was saying, being really clear about what the purpose of the podcast is. Doing some time planning. I love that Gab's working forward with someone to plan out all their 2026 episodes. Michelle and I often plan months in advance what our topics are going to be. And we're always listening to what are people asking about, what's happening in our frequently asked questions that come into our mastermind or, wherever it is that we're listening. And if you're going to do a podcast, this is not to dissuade anyone, but there is the production, there is the creative, there is the creating the podcast, and there's the marketing of the podcast. So if you are going to put this into your timeline as something you do, you want to have a realistic view of what sort of resources is it going to take to do the podcast. And we're all way too busy to be doing a podcast if it doesn't have a very clear objective, a very clear outcome. So good. We're going to give you a link to the resource that we mentioned. It's 5 proven steps to attract bigger audiences and more clients without spending a cent, and doing that with your podcast. We're going to give you the link for that in just a moment. Also, if there's other podcast episodes that are worth listening to that are complementary to this episode, we will also give you links to those. So stay tuned for that. We love doing this show. We love having a guest on, as Michelle said in the beginning, and we want to share this show with as many people as possible. So we would really value it if you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoyed Gab. Not only go and check out Gab, but leave us a rating or review wherever you listen. Apple Podcasts is the big kahuna of reviews. That would be really helpful. But wherever you're listening, if you can leave a review, or you can, send us a message over on our Facebook page and tell us what you loved. One person who is a long-time listener commented on the fact that this show was mentioned in a list of top 10 content podcasts. That listener is Leanne Faulkner of Fortitude at Work, and she helps business owners specifically deal with the challenge of mental health as a business owner. That's really her area of expertise. She has her own experience of having grown and sold a business and having to go through some emotional times and some of the heaviness that can come with growing a business. And so she does one-on-one coaching, she does keynote presentations, and so you'll find her at fortitudeatwork.com.au. We'll put that link in the show notes as well as an interview that I did with Leanne, just so you can check that out and hear more about that if that interests you. Anyway, the lovely Leanne said on our achievement of being in the top 10 content podcast, she said, very well deserved. It's my number 1 podcast to listen to, top of my list. Thank you so much, Leanne. We adore you leaving that comment. So anything we mentioned here today is going to be over on our show notes at herbusiness.com/grow your podcast. That's herbusiness.com/grow your podcast. Michelle, what do we have coming up in the next show? Very exciting.
Yeah, this is a great one. We've got a return guest, which we don't often do, but this is somebody that came a while ago and spoke to us about Facebook ads. And, that's an area that's changing all the time. So we've invited Stacey Ann Hughes, Facebook, Instagram, Meta expert, back to talk about what's new with Facebook and Instagram ads and what's working right now. So the formats that are getting results, there's different formats for ads. Which one should we be focusing on? The types of creative that's getting results right now, and it's not perhaps what we might be used to. The metrics we need to be paying attention to right now, and also some old strategies that used to be the must-do strategies that actually could be turning out to be mistakes in the current landscape, and how to avoid doing those, and which ones should we be keeping on doing and which ones should we not. That's all in the next episode.
That is coming up 2 weeks from now. So if you don't already subscribe to the show, you want to hit the follow or subscribe button wherever you are listening. Once again, thank you to the lovely Gab Burke. Be sure to check out her free resource and the one-on-one coaching she's doing. She mentioned she only works with a few clients. So if you have a podcast and you want to grow it, I would definitely be getting her on your team. And once again, those details will be at herbusiness.com/grow your podcast. Michelle, anything you want to say before we go?
I just loved her encouragement to be authentic and to connect. And I think it's about showing up, and just knowing that how we show up as ourselves is one of the most powerful things that we can do. So thanks, Gab, for sharing that message and all the other great tips. But if you're listening and you've got a podcast right now, or you're thinking of a podcast, this is just a gentle encouragement to just show up more fully as you and to connect.
Thank you for listening. We so appreciate you being here, and we'll see you next time right here on the Content Source Podcast. Bye for now.